In the single leg squat level 1 exercise, you're now going to be executing very similar form as you learned in single leg squat neuromuscular retraining exercise level 1 and 2. So how do we get in this exercise? How do we do this absolutely perfectly? First, you're going to stand on one foot. Next, while squatting, you're going to keep the knee primarily over the heel. If it transfers forward, if your tibia goes into an inclination of up to about 22 degrees, 25 degrees, so a slight little tilt, it's okay. But what you don't want to do during this exercise, let's go ahead, is just bring that knee way over the toes. You do not want to do that. You want to avoid that. It changes the muscle usage. It becomes quad dominant. You start deactivating the glutes and bringing the recruitment down. So the knee should stay over the heel. The foot will stay straight. Then very, very important, the patella tendon is going to stay directly in line with the second and third toe. Next, the acetabulum or hip joint is going to stay as in line with the patella tendon as you can possibly keep it. As you know from other exercise series, standing on one leg, what you can't do is have this hip perfectly over the patella tendon unless you do a ton of retro Trendelenburg and put this hip into hip abduction, right? Just because of balance points in center of gravity, what will happen is your body will transition the foot towards the center. But what you do not want to do is this. Yes. So you don't want to excessively bring this hip way out here and the knee in. That creates a lot of shear stress in the spine, the hip, and the knee. So now that we have all the mechanics of that, let's go ahead and turn and look sideways here. So now we're progressing up the kinetic chain. We're going to take a look at the pelvis. What should be happening with the pelvis? The pelvis should be staying neutral. So notice how Matt's belt line is primarily just straight here. A little tipping down is totally cool. That's okay. But you want to keep that belt line basically level, which means you have a neutral pelvic position. What you don't want is anterior tilting or posterior tilting. Keeping the pelvis neutral. Spine, of course, should stay upright. You shouldn't be flexing in the spine, this type of thing. You should have a very slight lordotic curve in the lumbar spine, a very slight kyphotic curve in the thoracic spine, and then a slight lordotic curve in the cervical spine. The center of the ear should be over the center of the shoulder. Maintain all of those alignments while, let's go ahead and turn back towards the camera, doing this motion. Now that you understand all the alignment of the body, let's talk about while you're squatting. Go ahead. So one big thing to point out is that what you're going to have to try to do, because it's so common, go ahead and come back up, is try to lift this side hip after. So you're going to try to lift this floating side hip after you really begin to descend and feel the load from the squat. Why? Number one, if we do that way up here, it's out of alignment. So don't start doing that there. Number two, you're going to find out that as you start descending into a single leg squat, you're going to start dropping this side pelvis because the glute medius on this right side, this glute medius starts going weak and not being able to support and keep proper alignment, so it allows this side to fall. You don't want that. So to really focus on that and recruit that glute medius as you go into the squat, you're going to try to do what's called a retro Trendelenburg. You're not going to do a retro Trendelenburg. What you're really going to do is just keep that pelvis level here, because what you don't want to happen is this. So you have to try to literally almost overdo it so that you stay level. Again, goal is not to lift this side higher. Goal is to stay level. Thought is keep this side higher so that you stay level. Lastly, let's cover this thigh position, that it's going backward and not forward. And let's also talk about depth, or how to get the proper depth on the single leg squat. So first, we're going to have this leg back because basically all athletic activity is done with the foot back, right? When you're going to run, what are you going to do? One foot transfers behind you as you have this leg. Once this leg's going forward, there's no real strength being applied to it. Any athletic activity where you're really having to drive, or you're hiking a mountain, or you're doing any single leg activity, which most lower body functional activity is all single leg. Rarely are you doing 2 feet at one time. So with that being said, that foot is typically behind you, and that's the reason why we do a single leg squat with the foot going behind and that knee going straight down towards the ground, and we don't do the pistol squat variation, is because of that reason. Next, depth. Let's talk about depth. When you start doing the single leg squat, unless you are super stable, super strong, super capable person, you're probably not going to get to 90 your first time out on a single leg squat. And even if you can get to single leg squat at 90 degrees, you might not get there in the first set or the first few reps. So what you want to do is kind of what Matt's doing there, what she just started showing you, this progression where like maybe the first rep we go to like 45 or so, and then we can increase during the set, going to 55 and then 65 and then 75 and then 90. And that might happen in the set, or that might happen over the course of 2-3 months that you're going 45 and then 55, 65, 75. And then what am I talking about with the degrees, right? Because you may not know exactly what I mean by that. So we can turn this way because we have the second camera view. So what I really mean is how much knee bend. So how much knee bend is based on keeping the knee over the heel, or primarily over the heel. If you go forward, you're compensating to get 90, so that doesn't count. Knees over the heel, and we're not going to excessively flex at the hip. Thank you, perfect, exactly, to get there either. So we're gonna stay we're gonna keep the spinal line, so you can see with the second view video here, that the spinal line will match the tibial line. So you want the spinal line to be in line with the tibial line. So those two match.